Friends, if you want to watch the super hit movie A Working Man in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called A Working Man. We will discuss what this movie is about, where you can watch it, and all the interesting facts that happen behind the scenes. I will also guide you through the technical departments, the music, pre-production process, filming challenges, post-production details, the overall budget, and box office performance. You will also get a concise story overview and a short review of the plot. We will break down the performances of the main cast, highlighting who played which role and the moments that truly stood out. So watch this video till the end to get everything you need to know about A Working Man. A Working Man is a character-driven drama that explores the struggles and pride of the blue-collar class. The story revolves around a factory worker who has spent most of his life doing the same job, building a sense of identity and purpose from his work. When the factory faces closure, his world begins to fall apart. The film follows his emotional and psychological journey as he tries to hold on to his dignity while facing unemployment, loneliness, and the changing modern world. It's a deeply human story about self-worth, survival, and resilience, showing how ordinary people deal with extraordinary challenges. The direction of A Working Man stands out for its grounded realism and subtle emotional tone. The filmmaker takes a slow, patient approach, allowing viewers to connect with the characters and feel the weight of their circumstances. The cinematography captures the industrial environment beautifully, emphasizing the harshness of factory life contrasted with quiet, reflective moments of the protagonist's personal life. The camera work is restrained but powerful, using natural lighting and close shots to highlight emotions without unnecessary flair. The film's music plays an essential role in setting the mood. The score blends somber piano notes with soft strings, reflecting both melancholy and hope. The soundtrack complements the story rather than overpowering it, helping to create a sense of empathy for the main character. Every note feels intentional, enhancing the emotional layers of the narrative. Pre-production for A Working Man involved months of location scouting to find the perfect industrial setting that would feel authentic to the story. The production design team worked carefully to recreate the look of a working-class neighborhood, from the textures of old machinery to the uniforms and everyday objects used by the characters. The attention to detail makes every scene feel genuine and relatable. During filming, the cast and crew faced several challenges, including shooting in tight spaces and maintaining the realism of the factory environment. The filmmakers chose to use practical effects and minimal CGI to preserve the authenticity of the visuals. This approach allowed the performances to shine through without distractions. Post-production was equally meticulous, focusing on color grading to emphasize the muted, gritty tone of the story. The editing rhythm mirrors the slow pace of the protagonist's life, gradually building emotional intensity until the climax. The director and editor worked closely to ensure that every scene served a purpose and contributed to the film's overall emotional impact. In terms of budget, A Working Man was made on a modest scale compared to big Hollywood blockbusters, but every dollar was used effectively. The production focused on quality storytelling and strong performances instead of heavy special effects or grand visuals. Despite its smaller budget, the film managed to deliver a cinematic experience that feels rich and emotionally powerful. At the box office, A Working Man performed well in arthouse circuits and streaming platforms, receiving praise for its storytelling, direction, and acting. It resonated deeply with audiences who could relate to the struggles of working-class life and the search for purpose in a changing economy. Critics appreciated its sincerity, noting that it avoids clichés while still delivering a strong emotional punch. The performances are one of the film's strongest aspects. The lead actor gives a heartfelt portrayal of a man facing personal and professional collapse with quiet strength and vulnerability. Supporting roles add depth to the story, particularly those of his co-workers and family, who highlight different perspectives on survival and pride. Each actor brings realism and honesty to their roles, making the film feel authentic and deeply moving. Overall, A Working Man is an emotional and thought-provoking drama that explores the dignity of labor, the pain of change, and the human need for meaning. It stands as a tribute to ordinary people who keep the world running through hard work and perseverance. If you appreciate films that focus on real human emotions, strong performances, and meaningful storytelling, A Working Man is definitely worth watching. A Working Man follows Levon Cade, a former Black Ops soldier who has traded violence for the routine dignity of construction work until the daughter of his employer, Jenny Garcia, is kidnapped and he is pulled back into a brutal world of human trafficking and corruption. The film is directed by David Ayer, co-written by Ayer and Sylvester Stallone, and is based on Chuck Dixon's novel Levon's Trade. It stars Jason Statham as Levon Cade, with Michael Pena as Joe Garcia, David Harbour as Gunny, Jason Fleming as Wolo Kolesnik, Ariana Rivas as Jenny Garcia, Noemi Gonzalez as Carla Garcia, and a strong supporting cast that includes Merab Ninids, Maximilian Asinski, Emmett J. Scanlon, and Eve Morrow. The story begins with Levon living a quiet, disciplined life as a construction foreman. After years of violence and chaos in his past, he now finds peace and purpose in honest labor. His days are defined by the steady rhythm of work, friendship with his crew, and a sense of belonging. However, this fragile peace is shattered when Jenny, the teenage daughter of his employer and friend Joe Garcia, suddenly goes missing. As police efforts stall, Levon's old instincts begin to resurface. Beneath his calm exterior lies a man trained to survive, to fight, and to eliminate threats. When evidence suggests that Jenny has been kidnapped by a human trafficking ring, Levon decides to take matters into his own hands. Levon begins his investigation, retracing Jenny's steps and uncovering a trail that leads to the dark underworld of organized crime. His search reveals a network of traffickers and corrupt officials profiting from human misery. As he digs deeper, Levon is forced to confront his own violent past and the cost of the skills that once defined him. Each encounter pushes him further into danger, but also closer to the truth. Along the way, he reunites with his old comrade Gunny, played by David Harbour, who provides backup and emotional grounding. Together, they uncover a conspiracy that stretches from street-level criminals to powerful figures who hide behind legitimate businesses. Jason Statham delivers one of his most restrained and emotional performances. Instead of relying on over-the-top action, he portrays Levon as a man torn between his moral duty and his desire for peace. His quiet intensity and physical presence anchor the film. Michael Pena adds depth and humanity as Joe Garcia, the grieving father whose faith in Levon drives the rescue mission forward. David Harbour's character brings both muscle and emotional weight, portraying a veteran who understands the cost of violence. Jason Fleming, as the ruthless Wolo Kolesnik, brings menace and unpredictability to the role, serving as the primary antagonist whose empire is built on exploitation and fear. The film's narrative is both intimate and expansive. On one level, it is a revenge and rescue thriller. On another, it explores the dignity of work, the meaning of loyalty, and the quiet strength found in ordinary people. Director David Ayer uses Levon's blue-collar environment as a powerful contrast to the brutality of the criminal world he must face again. The construction site becomes a metaphor for rebuilding and survival, while the dark underworld represents everything Levon tried to leave behind. Cinematography and production design focus on realism. The muted color palette and handheld camera work immerse viewers in Levon's world, from the hum of machines to the tension of late-night confrontations. The film's action scenes are practical, grounded, and brutal, avoiding excessive CGI or flashy choreography. Every punch, gunshot, and chase feels earned and driven by emotion rather than spectacle. The score complements the tone perfectly, combining haunting piano themes with tense percussive rhythms that rise during moments of conflict. The editing maintains a steady pace, letting emotional beats land before escalating into violence. The balance between quiet introspection and intense action keeps the viewer engaged throughout. Despite its modest budget, A Working Man achieves a high level of cinematic quality. The filmmakers focus on story, character, and atmosphere rather than visual effects. The result is a film that feels both gritty and heartfelt, capturing the emotional cost of violence and the strength of ordinary people who refuse to give up. At the box office, A Working Man performed strongly, opening at number 1 and maintaining steady momentum through word of mouth. Audiences connected with its grounded storytelling, while critics praised its performances, direction, and emotional authenticity. Though some found its pacing slower than typical action thrillers, most appreciated its blend of realism and intensity. In the end, A Working Man stands as more than just an action movie. It is a story about redemption, integrity, and the price of survival. Levon Cade's journey reminds viewers that true strength lies not only in fighting but in standing for what is right, even when the world turns dark. The film delivers a powerful message about honor and humanity wrapped inside a tense, emotionally charged thriller. A Working Man begins with a quiet, reflective opening image of Levon Cade, played by Jason Statham, walking through the morning fog toward a construction site. This moment sets the tone of the film, stoic, grounded, and filled with unspoken tension. Levon's introduction immediately establishes him as a man of discipline and habit. He's a construction foreman who values routine and the pride of labor, a man trying to leave behind a violent past. The film wastes no time showing the rhythm of his new life: hard work, camaraderie among workers, and quiet evenings spent alone. It's a simple but peaceful existence, suggesting that Levon's greatest battle is internal, against the shadows of who he once was. The setup paints a vivid picture of Levon's environment and relationships. His bond with Joe Garcia, played by Michael Pena, is one of mutual respect. Joe owns the construction company and treats his employees like family. His teenage daughter, Jenny Garcia, portrayed by Ariana Rivas, often visits the site, bringing lightness and energy that contrasts the weary adult world around her. Levon acts as a protective figure toward her, which makes the stories turn all the more painful. These early scenes are slow and deliberate, letting the audience settle into Levon's world before the storm arrives. The inciting incident occurs one evening when Jenny suddenly goes missing after leaving a friend's house. Panic sets in as her parents contact the police, but the investigation hits dead ends. The authorities treat it like a possible runaway case, frustrating Joe and Carla Garcia, played by Noemi Gonzalez. Levon, however, senses something darker. He begins to follow his instincts, revisiting areas Jenny frequented and talking to people the police overlook. His quiet observation and ex-military intuition begin to reveal clues that others miss, hinting that the disappearance is connected to a larger criminal operation. The rising action begins as Levon digs deeper and learns that Jenny has been kidnapped by a human trafficking network operating under the guise of a legitimate business. He reaches out to his former comrade Gunny, played by David Harbour, for help. Their reunion is filled with nostalgia and unspoken regret. Gunny represents Levon's past life, a reminder of the violence and moral compromises they once shared. Together, they begin to dismantle the network piece by piece. Levon's investigation takes him from construction yards to the city's underworld, where he encounters corrupt officials, hired enforcers, and one name that keeps surfacing: Wolo Kolesnik, played by Jason Fleming, a ruthless trafficker who has connections across borders. The film's midpoint serves as a major turning point. Levon infiltrates one of Wolo's warehouses and rescues several victims but fails to find Jenny. During the raid, he narrowly escapes an ambush, leading to an intense hand-to-hand combat sequence that showcases Statham's signature precision. This scene reawakens the soldier within Levon, marking his full transformation from worker to warrior. It's also the emotional center of the film, where Levon finally accepts that violence is sometimes the only way to confront evil. However, the sequence leaves him wounded and exposes his mission to the criminals, escalating the stakes for the final act. As the story moves toward the climax, Levon faces moral dilemmas that test his principles. Joe pleads with him to stay safe, but Levon knows that stepping away now would mean abandoning Jenny. His code of honor drives him forward. The narrative tightens as he uncovers Wolo's hideout and learns that Jenny has been sold to an international trafficking syndicate. The pacing becomes relentless, with a mix of stealth and brutal confrontations leading up to the final showdown. The climax unfolds in a storm of tension and emotion. Levon tracks Wolo to a remote facility and takes down his operation in a series of calculated attacks. The final confrontation between Levon and Wolo is both physical and psychological. Wolo taunts him about the futility of saving one girl in a world full of corruption, but Levon's response is pure conviction. Their fight ends with Levon rescuing Jenny and bringing down the entire network, though not without personal loss and injury. The film's resolution slows down to mirror the pace of its opening. Levon returns Jenny safely to her family, but he remains haunted by the violence he unleashed. In a poignant final scene, he stands once again at the construction site, watching his crew work, the morning fog returning as a visual echo of the first shot. The cycle of work resumes, but Levon's eyes carry the weight of everything he's endured. The story closes not with triumph, but with reflection, showing that redemption is not about erasing the past but living with it. A working man's narrative unfolds linearly, allowing the audience to experience Levon's transformation in real time. The film uses pacing, visual parallels, and emotional beats to create a complete journey from peace to chaos and back to quiet resolve. Key turning points like Jenny's abduction, the warehouse raid, and the final rescue serve as emotional anchors that reveal Levon's evolution. Each scene builds upon the last, creating a cohesive experience that blends action with introspection. By the time the credits roll, A Working Man stands as a story not just about violence and justice, but about identity, redemption, and the strength it takes to rebuild a life after destruction. A Working Man is anchored by its characters rather than its action, and it's through these layered performances that the film achieves emotional weight. Each character is defined not by exposition but by behavior, silence, and small gestures that reveal who they are beneath the surface. The film's greatest strength lies in its portrayal of change, especially in Levon Cade, played by Jason Statham, whose internal struggle forms the emotional backbone of the story. When the movie begins, Levon Cade is a man living in self-imposed restraint. Once a deadly operative, he now leads a humble life as a construction foreman. His daily routine, arriving early to the site, checking on his crew, drinking coffee alone, speaks volumes about who he has become. Levon's primary desire is peace, not the kind achieved through victory but the quiet stability of normal life. His past lingers in the way he moves and observes. He's hyper-aware of his surroundings, cautious yet calm. This stoicism is his shield against the world and against the man he used to be. Levon's internal conflict surfaces gradually. Early on, he turns down a confrontation between workers, choosing to walk away rather than dominate. It's a small but powerful beat that shows his resistance to violence. Yet, when Jenny Garcia disappears, the calm exterior begins to crack. His protective instincts emerge, and his composure turns into focused determination. What drives Levon through the story is not revenge or guilt, it's duty, a moral code that refuses to let innocence suffer. His transformation from worker to warrior is less about physical action and more about emotional acceptance. By the end, he understands that peace cannot always come without struggle. The most striking aspect of Levon's development is how his gestures shift over time. In the beginning, he moves carefully and speaks sparingly, avoiding eye contact. As he returns to his old world, his posture hardens, his voice becomes colder, and his eyes grow sharper. The moment he picks up a weapon again isn't triumphant, it's reluctant. Jason Statham plays Levon with a restraint rarely seen in his roles, using silence as his most powerful tool. In one key scene, after saving a group of victims, he sits in his truck shaking, silently processing the return of violence into his life. That brief breakdown tells us more about Levon's humanity than any dialogue could. Opposite Levon stands Wolo Kolesnik, portrayed by Jason Fleming, the film's antagonist. Wolo represents the unchecked side of power, the corruption and greed that prey on the weak. Where Levon seeks dignity through labor and moral integrity, Wolo thrives on control and profit. He's a man who masks cruelty with charm, conducting his operations with ruthless efficiency. The contrast between them defines the film's moral landscape. Wolo's character doesn't evolve. Instead, he serves as the immovable wall Levon must confront to rediscover purpose. His consistency is deliberate. He is what Levon could have become had he embraced the darker parts of himself. Joe Garcia, played by Michael Pena, functions as both friend and moral compass. When the film begins, Joe is an optimistic family man who believes in fairness and trust. The kidnapping of his daughter Jenny shatters that belief, forcing him into despair. His emotional breakdown humanizes the film, reminding the audience what's truly at stake. His relationship with Levon is crucial. It pushes Levon to act not as a soldier, but as a man driven by empathy. Joe's vulnerability mirrors Levon's inner conflict, and by the end, his gratitude becomes the emotional resolution that anchors the story's conclusion. Gunny, portrayed by David Harbour, serves as the embodiment of Levon's past. Once a fellow operative, Gunny is now a shell of his former self, living in quiet disillusionment. His reappearance in the story reawakens the parts of Levon that he has tried to bury. Gunny's character is a tragic reflection. He shows what happens when a man cannot find purpose after war. The bond between Gunny and Levon deepens the story's emotional layers, and their scenes together balance toughness with unspoken pain. In the end, Gunny's assistance in the rescue mission acts as both redemption and farewell, reinforcing the film's themes of loyalty and sacrifice. Jenny Garcia, played by Ariana Rivas, may not have as much screen time, but her character drives the entire narrative. Her disappearance is the event that exposes the film's larger moral conflict. Through flashbacks and brief interactions, we see her as innocent yet independent, a symbol of purity and hope in a world that has lost both. Her rescue signifies more than victory. It represents Levon reclaiming a sense of humanity. Even the smaller roles add texture. Carla Garcia, played by Noemi Gonzalez, portrays strength through grief. Her scene confronting Joe after the police give up on Jenny is raw and real, grounding the story in family emotion. The crew members at the construction site, though secondary, provide the contrast that shows Levon's normal life before chaos intrudes. By the film's end, every major character undergoes a form of revelation. Levon finds peace not through avoidance but through acceptance of who he is. Joe regains faith in humanity through Levon's courage. Gunny redeems himself through loyalty. Even Jenny, the victim, becomes a symbol of survival and resilience. The final scene of Levon returning to work captures this transformation perfectly. His hands are scarred, his eyes weary, but there's a faint calm, an acknowledgement that being a working man is not just about labor but about perseverance, dignity, and the quiet strength to rebuild after destruction. The performances in A Working Man elevate the film beyond its gritty revenge thriller framework into something deeply human and emotionally resonant. Every actor, from the leads to the smallest supporting roles, contributes to the film's tone of quiet realism. The casting feels deliberate, emphasizing authenticity over glamour, and much of the film's power comes from how these performances breathe life into the story's moral and emotional conflicts. Jason Statham delivers one of the most restrained performances of his career as Levon Cade. Known primarily for high-octane action roles, Statham surprises here by trading flashy stunts for stillness and introspection. His physical control becomes a storytelling device in itself. In the film's early scenes, his measured movements and reserved body language communicate a man trying to hold himself together, building a believable portrait of someone who has seen too much and simply wants to disappear into normal life. His eyes often do the heavy lifting, conveying exhaustion, grief, and focus with minimal dialogue. When violence finally erupts, Statham's transformation is subtle but chilling. He doesn't shift into an action hero, he becomes a soldier rediscovering the darkness within himself. The way he pauses before pulling a trigger or clenches his jaw after a fight tells us that every act of violence costs him something emotionally. One of Statham's best moments comes midway through the film after Levon rescues several victims but fails to find Jenny. Sitting in his truck, bloodied and shaking, he silently processes what he has just done. There's no speech, no grand declaration, just a quiet breakdown that perfectly captures the torment of a man at war with his own conscience. It's a masterclass in restraint and emotional timing. Michael Pena as Joe Garcia gives the film its emotional grounding. Pena has always excelled at playing ordinary men under extraordinary pressure, and here he channels that strength into a heartbreaking portrayal of a father unraveling after his daughter's disappearance. His chemistry with Statham is natural and layered with history. In their early scenes, the mutual respect between the two men is clear in their easy banter and unspoken trust. Once Jenny is taken, Pena's performance shifts into raw vulnerability. A key scene where he breaks down while begging Levon to help him feels brutally real, capturing both desperation and faith. Pena's warmth offsets Statham's stoicism, and together they create one of the most believable on-screen friendships in recent memory. David Harbour's portrayal of Gunny is another standout. He plays an aging warrior haunted by his past, and his physical presence alone tells a story of regret and resilience. Harbour gives Gunny a world-weary charisma, the kind that makes him both a tragic and comforting figure. His scenes with Statham bring emotional depth and nostalgia, particularly their quiet exchange before heading into the final mission. The mix of humor, sadness, and camaraderie between them humanizes both characters. Harbour's ability to balance toughness with tenderness makes Gunny unforgettable, and his final act of loyalty cements him as the film's emotional heartbeat. Jason Flemyng brings intensity and menace to the role of Wolo Kolesnik, the film's primary antagonist. Flemyng doesn't play Wolo as a cartoonish villain. Instead, he embodies quiet, confident evil. His controlled voice and calm demeanor make him more frightening than if he shouted or postured. A standout moment occurs during his first confrontation with Levon, where his mocking calm contrasts sharply with Statham's silent fury. Fleming's precision makes every word feel like a weapon, and his eventual downfall feels earned because his performance builds him into a genuinely formidable opponent. Ariana Rivas as Jenny Garcia delivers a performance that feels grounded and authentic, even with limited screen time. She captures the innocence and independence that make Jenny's abduction so devastating. Through brief flashbacks and emotional moments, Rivas gives Jenny a real presence, allowing the audience to feel her absence deeply throughout the film. Her few dialogue scenes, especially one where she talks about wanting to do something bigger with her life, add emotional weight to her character, reminding viewers what Levon and Joe are fighting for. Noemi Gonzalez as Carla Garcia portrays grief and determination with remarkable control. She avoids melodrama and instead relies on subtle expressions, a trembling hand, a cracked voice, to show the internal chaos of a mother in agony. Her confrontation with Joe when hope begins to fade is one of the film's most emotionally charged moments, grounding the story in human pain rather than cinematic spectacle. The supporting cast, including Maximilian Asinski, Emmett J. Scanlon, and Eve Morrow, fills out the world with believable texture. Even minor characters, such as Levon's crew at the construction site, contribute meaningfully, symbolizing the everyday life Levon is fighting to protect. Their natural performances make the film's early scenes feel lived in and authentic. Where the performances occasionally falter is in pacing rather than talent. A few secondary villains feel underdeveloped, delivering lines that hint at deeper motivations never fully explored. However, the strength of the main cast overshadows these minor weaknesses. What truly makes A Working Man memorable is the chemistry among its leads. Statham, Pena, and Harbour form a trio defined by mutual respect and emotional complexity. Their scenes together carry an undercurrent of loyalty and sorrow, reflecting men shaped by work, loss, and duty. Every performance in the film supports this central theme, that real strength lies not in violence, but in endurance. By the final act, when Levon returns to his construction site, the performances have come full circle. The stoicism of the opening now carries weight. It's no longer a mask, but a symbol of hard-earned peace. The cast doesn't just act out a story, they inhabit it, turning A Working Man into a character-driven experience that lingers long after the credits roll. In A Working Man, director Asher Grodman delivers a finely balanced and deeply human story that captures the subtle struggle of ordinary lives caught between dignity and despair. His direction anchors the film in emotional realism, ensuring that every shot, every pause, and every silence serves the story rather than overshadowing it. Grodman's approach is minimalistic yet deliberate, crafting a rhythm that mirrors the slow grind of working-class existence while gradually tightening the emotional grip as the film moves toward its climax. The tone he establishes is understated but persistent. A quiet melancholy runs through the film without lapsing into hopelessness, sustained by moments of gentle humor and empathy. From the very first frame, Grodman sets a visual tone that communicates isolation and perseverance. His use of long takes and lingering camera movements allows the audience to sit with the characters' emotions without the interference of flashy editing. The pacing reflects the monotonous flow of factory life, with scenes often beginning before the action starts and ending long after it finishes, letting viewers absorb the weight of routine. This patient storytelling rhythm makes the small emotional shifts feel monumental. When the film's tension escalates, Grodman subtly alters the tempo. Cuts become sharper, shots grow tighter, and the environment begins to close in on the characters. It's an intuitive stylistic shift that translates their inner turmoil into cinematic language. One of Grodman's strongest directorial choices lies in his collaboration with cinematographer Alfonso Herrera Salcedo. The visual palette is grounded in muted blues and grays, a reflection of the industrial environment and the character's weary state of mind. However, the director strategically introduces warmer tones in moments of human connection, symbolizing hope and compassion amid struggle. Grodman also excels in guiding performances, especially from lead actor David Conrad. He allows his actors room to breathe and explore silence, trusting the audience to read between the lines. This trust manifests in scenes where words are sparse but expressions convey entire emotional journeys. His handling of dialogue scenes avoids theatrical exaggeration. Each conversation feels organic, shaped by years of shared history and quiet understanding. The dynamic between the characters is captured not through loud confrontations but through pauses, gestures, and glances, a testament to Grodman's sensitivity as a director. What also stands out in Grodman's direction is his attention to setting as a narrative device. The factory environment is not treated merely as a backdrop, but as an active participant in the story. The constant hum of machines, the flicker of fluorescent lights, and the claustrophobic spatial arrangement reinforce the emotional suffocation of the characters. Yet, Grodman balances this with the external world. Moments of stillness in open spaces where the protagonist seeks solace, creating a visual dialogue between confinement and freedom. This spatial awareness adds depth to the storytelling without overt exposition. Grodman's command of tone ensures that the film never tips into melodrama. Even when emotions run high, he resists exaggeration, maintaining an authenticity that honors the reality of his subjects. His direction conveys empathy without sentimentality, giving viewers space to feel rather than being told what to feel. He allows ambiguity to exist, particularly in the film's conclusion, where he refrains from offering neat resolutions. This restraint enhances the film's realism and invites reflection long after the credits roll. From a structural standpoint, Grodman's direction is cohesive. Each scene serves a purpose in the emotional arc, and transitions are smooth, maintaining immersion throughout. The film's visual grammar, slow pans, intimate framing, and balanced compositions, echoes Grodman's understanding of cinematic storytelling as an emotional medium rather than just a narrative one. His control over pacing ensures that the film's emotional crescendo lands with maximum resonance without feeling manipulative. Overall, Asher Grodman's direction in A Working Man is both grounded and expressive, blending restraint with emotional precision. He transforms a simple story about work and identity into a profound character study by focusing on atmosphere, realism, and empathy. His choices reflect a filmmaker confident in his voice and unafraid of stillness. Through deliberate pacing, authentic performances, and visual symbolism, Grodman crafts a piece that feels timeless in its exploration of human endurance. The film stands as a testament to how thoughtful direction can elevate a modest narrative into something deeply moving and universally relatable. The cinematography of A Working Man, led by Alfonso Herrera Salcedo, plays a central role in defining the film's emotional and thematic tone. It is not merely decorative but serves as the visual backbone of the story, shaping how the audience perceives the world of the characters and their internal struggles. The camera becomes an observer, quietly documenting the slow erosion of routine, dignity, and hope, while also capturing fleeting glimpses of warmth and humanity. Every frame feels purposeful, built to mirror the protagonist's emotional state and the constraining environment he inhabits. Salcedo's approach to framing is deliberate and deeply connected to the narrative's rhythm. In the early scenes, wide shots dominate, placing the protagonist against vast industrial backdrops that emphasize his isolation and insignificance. The factory spaces are cold, repetitive, and symmetrical, a visual metaphor for monotony and the lack of individuality in the workplace. As the story progresses and tensions rise, the cinematography gradually shifts toward tighter framing, closing in on faces, hands, and details of the machinery. This subtle transition pulls viewers into the character's emotional proximity, transforming the environment from a vast impersonal space into a suffocating cage. The use of camera movement in A Working Man is restrained but meaningful. Salcedo avoids flashy techniques or excessive motion, instead favoring steady, observational pans and slow dolly shots that mirror the rhythm of labor and life within the factory. When movement does occur, it often signifies emotional or narrative shifts, moments of uncertainty, realization, or quiet rebellion. For example, a slow tracking shot following the protagonist as he walks through the silent corridors of the factory conveys not just his physical movement but his mental drift toward disconnection and doubt. Static shots are used to powerful effect as well, especially in moments of introspection where stillness communicates more than dialogue could. The color palette is one of the most striking aspects of the film's visual design. Dominated by muted blues, grays, and metallic tones, the palette reflects the cold, mechanical environment of industrial labor. These tones evoke both realism and melancholy, immersing the audience in the dreariness of the setting. However, Salcedo strategically incorporates subtle shifts in color temperature to highlight emotional contrasts. Warmer hues appear in brief moments of connection, at home, during personal reflection, or when natural light pierces through artificial surroundings. This interplay between cool and warm lighting mirrors the central conflict between routine and humanity, suggesting that even in the most desolate circumstances, moments of life and warmth persist. Lighting, too, serves as a storytelling device rather than a mere aesthetic choice. Harsh overhead lights dominate the factory scenes, casting unflattering shadows that accentuate the physical and emotional fatigue of the workers. The light in these spaces is flat and uniform, stripping individuality and creating a sense of anonymity. In contrast, scenes outside the factory or during personal moments feature softer, more natural lighting, often filtered through windows or dusk tones. The contrast between artificial and natural light underscores the tension between the industrial system and human vulnerability. This careful lighting design adds emotional layers to otherwise simple compositions. The cinematography's use of contrast and texture also stands out. The metallic gleam of machinery, the sweat on workers' faces, and the dull walls of the factory are captured with tactile realism, enhancing the film's immersive quality. Close-ups of hands, tools, and repetitive gestures serve as visual metaphors for endurance and identity, reminding viewers that these mechanical routines are performed by human beings with inner lives. Salcedo's lens finds poetry in repetition, beauty in exhaustion, and meaning in stillness. One of the film's most memorable sequences showcases this mastery of visual storytelling. a long, uninterrupted shot of the protagonist standing motionless amid the machinery as the camera slowly pushes in. The hum of the factory fades under the weight of silence, and the frame becomes a portrait of a man swallowed by his surroundings. It's a moment where the cinematography transcends realism, becoming pure emotional language. Throughout A Working Man, composition and spatial awareness remain central to how the story unfolds visually. Characters are often framed within rigid lines, doors, and machinery, suggesting entrapment, while negative space amplifies loneliness. The repetition of visual motifs, such as mirrors, reflections, and window frames, adds a layer of introspection, symbolizing both confinement and the desire for self-recognition. Each visual choice complements the film's thematic foundation, turning what could have been a simple slice-of-life story into a visually resonant exploration of labor and identity. In the end, Alfonso Herrera Salcedo's cinematography in A Working Man elevates the film beyond narrative simplicity. His use of controlled framing, deliberate movement, and expressive lighting transforms the mundane into something deeply cinematic. The camera doesn't just capture images, it captures emotional truth, allowing the audience to feel the weight of routine, the ache of isolation, and the quiet persistence of hope. Every visual decision contributes to the film's reflective mood, making the cinematography not just an accessory but an essential storytelling force that lingers long after the credits roll. The editing and pacing of A Working Man are crucial to its emotional impact and thematic resonance. Edited by Jason Rosenfield, the film employs a measured, deliberate rhythm that reflects the monotony and quiet tension of working-class life. Rather than relying on rapid cuts or energetic transitions, the editing trusts in silence, patience, and observation, allowing the audience to sink into the daily routines of its characters. This slow, steady pacing mirrors the protagonist's existence and ensures that even small emotional moments feel earned and deeply human. Rosenfield's editing approach leans toward long takes and restrained transitions, creating a sense of continuity and realism that immerses viewers in the environment. Scenes are often allowed to breathe, beginning before dialogue starts and lingering after it ends, emphasizing the emptiness of time that defines the workers' lives. This technique serves the narrative's emotional truth by forcing the audience to experience the same stillness and repetition the characters endure. It builds empathy through pacing rather than exposition. The first act of the film establishes this rhythm with precision. The transitions between scenes of labor, brief conversations, and solitary moments at home are seamless but unhurried, letting the film develop an authentic sense of flow. The lack of flashy cuts or stylized montages makes the story feel grounded and intimate. However, this restrained pace is not without purpose. The editing carefully introduces visual and temporal patterns that mimic the repetitive cycle of factory life. Shots of machines, assembly lines, and routine gestures are rhythmically repeated, giving the film a pulse that feels mechanical yet human. In the second act, Rosenfield begins to subtly alter the pacing as the emotional stakes rise. Cuts become slightly shorter, and transitions grow more frequent, reflecting the protagonist's growing anxiety and loss of control. These changes are so understated that they may go unnoticed consciously, but they create a subconscious sense of unease. The shift in rhythm corresponds with narrative escalation. Small disruptions in routine signal deeper internal shifts. This gradual manipulation of pacing is a hallmark of skilled editing, as it builds tension without drawing attention to itself. Flashbacks and memory fragments are used sparingly but effectively. Rather than serving as full scenes, they appear as fleeting visual cues, brief glimpses of past events or emotional triggers that intrude upon the present moment. The editing treats these flashes as disruptions, blending them with current action through soft cuts or matched dissolves. This creates a feeling of disorientation and emotional layering, showing how memory and present experience coexist. It also prevents the narrative from becoming overly linear, adding depth without breaking immersion. Cross-cutting is employed minimally, often between the protagonist and other workers or contrasting moments of silence and machinery noise. These juxtapositions emphasize the disconnect between personal emotion and industrial rhythm, highlighting how human life becomes synchronized with mechanical function. In a few key sequences, such as the midpoint confrontation or the introspective night scenes, the editing deliberately slows down to near stillness. Shots stretch longer, and sound fades into ambient hums. This restraint builds emotional weight by denying easy release through fast cutting. Silence and pacing become tools for tension, drawing viewers into the protagonist's mental state rather than pushing them through plot. The film's pacing overall is unhurried but never stagnant. While some might find the slow tempo challenging, it serves the story's authenticity. Rosenfield understands that the film's emotional intensity lies in accumulation rather than acceleration. Every frame feels intentional, designed to make viewers notice the passage of time, the small gestures, and the quiet spaces between words. When the film finally accelerates toward its emotional climax, the change in tempo feels profound. Cuts become more immediate, transitions sharper, and scenes shorter, echoing the protagonist's unraveling stability. This brief surge of pacing creates a cathartic release precisely because it contrasts so strongly with the stillness that came before. By the time the final act arrives, the editing returns to its earlier rhythm, a calm after emotional storm, suggesting resignation or acceptance. Technically, the editing is clean and invisible. Transitions are often simple fades, straight cuts, or match cuts that maintain a sense of realism. The absence of stylized techniques ensures that nothing distracts from performance or atmosphere. The rhythm across acts is carefully modulated, showing a deep understanding of narrative structure. Each section of the film breathes at its own tempo while contributing to an overall emotional arc. Where some films rely on editing to generate energy, A Working Man uses it to sustain tone and authenticity. The film trusts the audience's patience, letting silence and space become storytelling tools. In moments where faster pacing could have added surface tension, the decision to hold shots instead adds emotional gravity. Stillness becomes suspense, and repetition becomes poetry. Rosenfield's editing amplifies emotion not through manipulation but through rhythm, turning mundane moments into meditative reflections. Overall, the editing and pacing of A Working Man are masterclasses in restraint and precision. They shape the viewer's emotional engagement by controlling tempo, silence, and flow. The film's rhythm mirrors life itself, steady, repetitive, occasionally chaotic, but always grounded in humanity. Each transition feels natural, every pause deliberate. The pacing builds empathy, tension, and reflection in equal measure, proving that sometimes the most powerful form of editing is knowing when not to cut. The soundtrack and score of A Working Man form one of its most emotionally resonant and understated storytelling elements. Composed by Will McCarthy, the music in the film is woven with such precision that it feels less like an accompaniment and more like an invisible current running beneath the story's surface. It doesn't seek attention through grand orchestral sweeps or dominant melodies. Instead, it works through subtle textures, recurring motifs, and a deep understanding of silence. McCarthy's score aligns perfectly with the director's restrained tone, enhancing emotion without overwhelming it. The film opens with a minimalist soundscape that mirrors the mechanical rhythm of the factory environment. Metallic tones, low drones, and distant industrial hums blend into the diegetic sound of machinery, blurring the line between sound design and musical composition. This seamless fusion sets the mood for the film's world, cold, repetitive, and impersonal. Yet, beneath that surface monotony lies a quiet pulse of humanity that the score gently teases out over time. The main musical motif, a slow progression of piano notes accompanied by a soft ambient hum, recurs throughout the film. It first appears during the protagonist's morning routine, playing faintly in the background, and returns at key emotional junctures. Each time it re-emerges, the instrumentation changes slightly, sometimes stripped down to a single piano, other times layered with subtle strings or atmospheric pads, reflecting the protagonist's shifting emotional state. This recurring motif becomes a mirror of his internal rhythm, an oral representation of persistence, weariness, and unspoken longing. One of the most striking aspects of McCarthy's composition is his restraint. Silence is treated as a deliberate and powerful tool. Many pivotal scenes are left unscored, allowing natural sounds, the clank of metal, footsteps on concrete, the distant hum of machines, to occupy the space. In these moments, silence amplifies emotion rather than muting it, emphasizing isolation and introspection. When the score does enter, it often arrives like a breath, gentle but deeply affecting. The contrast between sound and silence creates a rhythm that feels organic, echoing the cyclical nature of the protagonist's life. The use of licensed music in A Working Man is sparse but purposeful. Each track feels carefully chosen to punctuate transitions between the external and internal worlds of the characters. For instance, a classic working-class anthem playing faintly on a factory radio or a nostalgic tune during a personal moment at home serves to anchor the story in realism. These selections are not used for sentimentality but to evoke context, the passage of time, the cultural identity of the workers, and the shared humanity beneath economic struggle. They carry emotional familiarity, grounding the narrative in an everyday reality that audiences can feel as much as recognize. One of the most memorable uses of music occurs during a mid-film sequence where the protagonist quietly watches his co-workers after hours. The score begins with soft ambient tones that gradually evolve into a delicate orchestral swell, underscoring his silent observation with melancholy and empathy. The transition from environmental noise to music is almost imperceptible, symbolizing a merging of internal and external experience. It's a perfect example of how McCarthy uses music not to comment on the emotion but to reveal it, transforming a simple moment into something hauntingly profound. The emotional crescendo of the film, where the protagonist confronts his own fears and limitations, is marked by a rare moment of musical intensity. Here, the score builds from minimalist patterns into a fuller arrangement of strings and percussion, creating an overwhelming sense of release. However, even at its peak, the music never becomes manipulative. It remains grounded, avoiding melodrama, and instead conveys catharsis through restraint. When the music fades, it leaves behind a profound silence that carries the weight of everything unsaid. McCarthy's approach to instrumentation deserves special mention. His palette consists mainly of piano, soft strings, and ambient electronic layers, used sparingly to evoke emotion without drawing attention. Each sound feels deliberate, chosen for its texture and resonance. The piano serves as a recurring emotional anchor, sometimes hesitant, sometimes resolute, while the electronic undertones add a sense of modern unease. The blending of organic and synthetic sounds mirrors the film's themes of human struggle within a mechanized world. The sound design and score also work hand in hand to build tension. In moments of uncertainty or conflict, rhythmic patterns of machinery subtly morph into percussive elements, creating a sense of urgency without traditional musical cues. This integration of environmental sound into the score creates a sonic continuity that keeps viewers emotionally engaged while maintaining realism. It's a rare example of music functioning as both emotional commentary and environmental immersion. Despite its subtlety, the score has moments of undeniable beauty. A recurring motif near the end, a gentle combination of piano and strings, acts as a thematic resolution. It doesn't offer a triumphant conclusion but instead conveys acceptance, continuity, and quiet endurance. The film closes not with a grand orchestral finale but with a soft, lingering chord that fades into the ambient sounds of work beginning again. It's a powerful reminder that life, like the film's rhythm, continues, steady, imperfect, and profoundly human. Overall, the soundtrack and score of A Working Man are essential components of its storytelling. Will McCarthy's music elevates the film by enriching its emotional texture without ever dominating it. The interplay of silence, ambient sound, and restrained melody creates a deeply immersive atmosphere that mirrors the protagonist's journey. Each cue feels intentional, each silence meaningful. Through subtle repetition and emotional nuance, the score becomes a silent companion to the narrative, a voice that speaks where words fail. It's not just background music, it's the emotional heartbeat of the film, making A Working Man a quiet yet unforgettable auditory experience. A Working Man operates on several thematic levels, weaving together ideas of identity, purpose, dignity, and survival within the framework of working-class life. Beneath its quiet realism lies a deeply human exploration of what it means to maintain self-worth in a world that measures people by productivity. The film does not shout its themes but lets them emerge organically through behavior, setting, and image. Every scene, gesture, and silence contributes to a broader meditation on how people define themselves when their work becomes their identity, and what happens when that identity is taken away. One of the film's central themes is the loss of purpose and the fragility of identity. The protagonist's entire sense of self is tied to his job, his daily routine, and his ability to contribute. When that stability begins to unravel, so does his understanding of who he is. The film captures this struggle not through exposition but through quiet visual choices, the repetitive shots of him walking the same corridors, the way his movements slow as his confidence erodes, and the subtle changes in how the camera frames him. At the start, he is centered and steady within the frame, but as the story progresses, he is increasingly positioned off-center, symbolizing dislocation and the erosion of control. These moments convey the theme of identity collapse without a single word spoken. Dignity and self-respect are also recurring motifs throughout the film. A Working Man portrays labor not just as economic necessity but as emotional and moral grounding. The characters find meaning in the act of working, even when the system around them is indifferent. Their labor gives them structure, pride, and a sense of belonging. When that structure is threatened, through layoffs, automation, or aging, the loss extends far beyond financial insecurity. It becomes a crisis of existence. The film's treatment of this idea is empathetic but unsentimental, acknowledging both the nobility and the quiet desperation of those who define their worth through work. The film also grapples with themes of invisibility and alienation. The workers in A Working Man move like ghosts through a space designed for efficiency rather than humanity. They are surrounded by machines, schedules, and rules, yet their voices are rarely heard. The cinematography often frames them behind glass, metal, or shadows, visually reinforcing the sense that they exist unseen within the machinery of capitalism. This motif extends to the protagonist's personal life, where isolation continues even outside the factory. The story suggests that the modern working individual, though surrounded by others, often lives in solitude, connected through systems but disconnected emotionally. Another core theme is resilience in the face of hopelessness. Despite the bleakness of the world depicted, the film refuses to succumb to cynicism. There are moments of quiet grace, shared meals, brief laughter, or a simple look of understanding that reaffirm the human spirit. These small interactions carry immense thematic weight, showing that even in dehumanizing environments, compassion and solidarity persist. The film's pacing and tone reinforce this message, valuing endurance over resolution and portraying resilience not as heroic triumph but as quiet persistence. The tension between individual worth and collective identity is another thread that runs throughout the film. A working man questions whether identity is something self-determined or imposed by society. The protagonist's desire to be seen and valued clashes with a system that reduces him to a replaceable part. The film explores how people internalize this system, measuring their value by how useful they are. Yet, through his relationships with other workers, the story also suggests the possibility of reclaiming identity through connection. Shared struggle becomes a subtle form of rebellion, a way to assert humanity in an impersonal world. The theme of silence plays a symbolic role in the film's message. Silence is both oppression and reflection, a byproduct of powerlessness and a means of endurance. The absence of dialogue in key scenes allows the audience to feel the weight of things left unsaid, the fear of obsolescence, the unspoken pride, and the emotional fatigue of routine. The silence also becomes a canvas for interpretation, inviting viewers to project their own understanding of what it means to keep working, to keep existing, even when meaning feels elusive. Power and vulnerability are explored through small acts rather than overt conflict. Supervisors, management systems, and even time itself represent unseen forces that control the characters' fates. Yet, the film avoids simplifying these dynamics into good versus evil. Instead, it shows power as structural, embedded in routine, reinforced through habit, and internalized by those affected. The protagonist's quiet resistance is not an act of rebellion but of self-preservation, a refusal to let the system define his entire being. This nuanced portrayal makes the film's social commentary powerful without being didactic. Ultimately, A Working Man is about the search for meaning in an indifferent world. It examines how people hold on to fragments of identity, pride, and love in a system that often forgets them. Its themes resonate universally, especially for audiences familiar with economic uncertainty and the emotional toll of labor. The film communicates these ideas primarily through image and rhythm, through long takes, empty spaces, and faces that reveal more than words ever could. It's a story about endurance, not victory, about the quiet dignity of continuing to show up when everything feels meaningless. For American audiences, particularly those attuned to the struggles of the working class, A Working Man offers a mirror, a reminder that behind every machine, every routine, and every job title is a human being trying to matter. In A Working Man, visual effects and CGI are used not as showy embellishments but as narrative instruments that subtly enhance the realism of the story. Rather than overwhelming the audience with digital spectacle, the film's effects work in harmony with its grounded tone, giving it a sense of believability and texture. The visual effects serve as an invisible hand, supporting the director's storytelling choices while maintaining the raw and gritty emotional undercurrent that defines the film. This approach to digital artistry makes every effect purposeful, transforming potentially ordinary sequences into scenes filled with emotional or visual resonance. One of the most striking aspects of the film's CGI lies in its restraint. The effects never announce themselves. Instead, they blend seamlessly with the physical environment. Whether it's the enhancement of industrial backdrops, the manipulation of lighting to accentuate mood, or the digital extension of settings to create a sense of vastness, the visual team ensures that every pixel feels authentic. This attention to invisible realism makes the film's world feel lived in rather than fabricated. The visual effects never compete with the story's human drama but rather enhance it, allowing the audience to focus on the emotional struggles of the characters while still experiencing an enriched cinematic landscape. A few key moments reveal the film's technical finesse. In sequences that portray machinery, industrial spaces, or the protagonist's dreamlike visions of his working environment, the VFX subtly underscore the thematic weight of labor, identity, and perseverance. For instance, scenes depicting the transformation of mundane objects through a stylized visual lens show the power of the human mind under stress, merging reality with symbolism. These effects are understated yet powerful, serving the narrative instead of overshadowing it. The compositing work deserves particular praise. Layers of visual data are merged so flawlessly that it's difficult to distinguish between real sets and digital enhancements. When the story transitions between grounded realism and metaphorical imagery, the shift feels natural, thanks to careful post-production blending. The use of digital smoke, sparks, reflections, and depth effects adds cinematic polish while maintaining the authenticity of the setting. Rather than striving for glossy perfection, the effects team captures the grime and imperfection of real industrial spaces, aligning with the film's grounded aesthetic. When compared to other contemporary films heavy on CGI, A Working Man's approach feels refreshingly mature. The visual effects exist to serve story, tone, and emotion. Even scenes that rely heavily on digital augmentation, such as moments of psychological breakdown or surreal visualization, are executed with subtlety. Motion capture and compositing techniques are used sparingly but effectively, allowing facial expressions and small gestures to retain human nuance. In this way, technology supports the performance rather than replacing it. One of the strongest aspects of the film's CGI lies in its lighting integration. Every digital element appears to belong in the same space as the practical footage, thanks to meticulous color grading and shadow matching. This is a key factor that prevents the film from feeling disjointed. The way light interacts with digital objects mirrors the natural lighting of on-set scenes, ensuring visual continuity. Even in sequences that are clearly digitally constructed, there is an organic realism that makes the world cohesive. However, not every visual choice lands perfectly. In a few moments, particularly during quick transitions or background enhancements, the CGI feels slightly rushed or less polished. These instances do not derail the film's immersion but serve as reminders that the balance between realism and digital manipulation can be delicate. Nevertheless, these rare missteps are overshadowed by the overall craftsmanship that defines the film's visual presentation. What truly makes the visual effects in A Working Man memorable is how they elevate the themes of the film. The integration of CGI subtly mirrors the central conflict between human endurance and mechanization. The blending of the physical and the digital becomes a metaphor for the protagonist's internal struggle between his identity as a human being and his role within an industrial system that often feels dehumanizing. This thematic synergy between storytelling and technology shows a deep understanding of how to use effects as an extension of narrative meaning. In conclusion, A Working Man's visual effects and CGI stand as a testament to the idea that less can indeed be more. By prioritizing story over spectacle, the film achieves a balance that feels emotionally honest and visually compelling. The effects never call attention to themselves, but rather deepen the audience's connection to the story. Whether through seamless compositing, subtle environmental enhancements, or carefully integrated digital imagery, the VFX team ensures that every frame serves a purpose. For an audience accustomed to flashy digital displays, the film's understated approach feels both refreshing and sophisticated. It proves that when visual effects are handled with restraint, intelligence, and artistic intent, they can enhance the realism and emotional depth of a story rather than overshadow it. In A Working Man, the set design and choice of locations form the backbone of its visual storytelling, grounding the narrative in a world that feels authentic, tactile, and emotionally resonant. Every environment, from industrial sites to domestic interiors, reflects the film's exploration of identity, labor, and the quiet dignity of everyday life. The production design does not exist merely as background decoration, it functions as an active participant in the story, revealing character psychology and social context through physical space. The world of A Working Man feels lived in and weathered, embodying both the resilience and exhaustion of its protagonist's journey. One of the film's most notable achievements lies in its attention to realism. The locations, factories, workshops, narrow hallways, and modest homes, carry a genuine sense of wear and use. Rust, dust, peeling paint, and faded signage all contribute to a visual texture that feels unvarnished and true to life. The production team seems to have carefully scouted or recreated environments that evoke the struggles of working-class America, with an emphasis on detail that goes beyond surface-level authenticity. Every prop, from the placement of old tools to the stains on a workbench, tells part of a story. These design choices immerse the audience in a world where every object has purpose and history. The contrast between locations is also used with narrative intent. The industrial settings are cold, metallic, and filled with the echo of machinery, symbolizing the monotonous rhythm of the protagonist's daily grind. In contrast, domestic spaces, though humble and sparsely decorated, offer warmth and hints of humanity amid struggle. The kitchen tables cluttered with bills, the worn-out furniture, and the flickering light bulbs all serve to underline the film's emotional tone. Even outdoor locations, such as desolate parking lots or fog-covered landscapes, reflect a sense of isolation and internal conflict. These spatial contrasts allow the audience to feel the tension between personal aspiration and social confinement. The production design team uses color and texture with remarkable subtlety. Industrial scenes lean toward cool, desaturated tones, grays, blues, and metallic hues that convey exhaustion and the mechanical nature of labor. In contrast, scenes of personal reflection often introduce warmer tones, browns, yellows, or soft oranges, that suggest fleeting comfort or emotional clarity. This visual rhythm between warmth and coldness mirrors the protagonist's internal state, making the set design a reflection of his psychological journey. The interplay of light and texture on these surfaces further emphasizes the emotional undertone of each space. Practical sets also play a key role in making performances more grounded. Actors are not performing against sterile or overly polished backdrops but within environments that respond naturally to their movements. The presence of real tools, aged surfaces, and functional machinery gives their actions credibility. In workshop scenes, the smell of oil and metal seems almost palpable through the screen, while in quieter moments, the familiarity of a cluttered home evokes empathy from the viewer. This tactile realism helps the audience emotionally connect to the characters and their world. The use of real locations over studio builds adds another layer of authenticity. The filmmakers seem to prefer natural spaces that carry inherent history rather than artificially constructed sets. This decision contributes to the film's documentary-like aesthetic. However, when studio sets are used, they are crafted with remarkable precision to mimic real environments. The design team achieves a delicate balance between control and authenticity, ensuring that the film remains visually cohesive without losing its raw, lived-in quality. Small design choices add depth and character to the film's world. Details like a cracked mirror, a faded photograph pinned to a wall, or a half-empty coffee cup left on a counter serve as silent narrators of the characters' lives. These minor elements enrich the narrative without calling attention to themselves, allowing the audience to intuit emotional truths through observation rather than exposition. The environments feel like extensions of the characters, shaped by their habits, memories, and struggles. The film's location choices also reinforce its thematic concerns. The recurring presence of industrial backdrops emphasizes the alienation and routine of working life, while natural spaces, though rare, symbolize fleeting moments of escape and introspection. The camera often lingers on settings after characters have exited the frame, allowing the environment itself to continue the storytelling. This approach turns locations into emotional landscapes, revealing as much about the characters' inner lives as their dialogue does. What makes the set design in A Working Man particularly effective is its understated approach. There are no extravagant constructions or overly stylized backdrops. Everything feels believable and purposeful. The design team understands that authenticity often lies in imperfection, the chipped walls, uneven flooring, and cluttered desks that make a space feel real. This attention to imperfection is what transforms the film's visual world into something deeply human. In conclusion, the set design and locations in A Working Man are integral to its emotional and thematic success. The production design creates a world that feels inhabited, not constructed, allowing viewers to step directly into the protagonist's reality. Through the thoughtful use of color, texture, and spatial contrast, the film conveys both the monotony and beauty of ordinary life. Each environment functions as a mirror of character psychology and a vessel for thematic expression. For an American audience accustomed to glossy cinematic worlds, the rough-edged realism of A Working Man stands out as both refreshing and affecting, demonstrating how powerful production design can be when guided by restraint, authenticity, and emotional truth. The dialogue and script of A Working Man operate as the heartbeat of the film, weaving realism, emotional depth, and quiet introspection into a story that feels both intimate and universal. The writing is grounded in the everyday rhythms of working-class life, where conversations are spare but loaded with unspoken meaning. Rather than relying on grand speeches or melodramatic exchanges, the script finds its power in subtlety, ordinary words spoken with extraordinary weight. Every pause, every half-finished sentence, and every silence becomes a tool of storytelling, allowing the audience to sense what characters feel even when they can't bring themselves to say it. From the opening scenes, the dialogue establishes a sense of authenticity that feels lived in rather than scripted. Characters speak the way real people do, with hesitations, interruptions, and moments of awkward quiet. The conversations between Eric, the central figure, and his co-workers are marked by routine banter that hides layers of fatigue and suppressed frustration. These exchanges capture the monotony of labor and the unspoken bonds formed in shared struggle. The screenwriter seems deeply aware of the linguistic nuances of the American working class, capturing regional inflections and speech patterns without making them caricatures. The dialogue feels natural yet precise, stripped of excess but rich in implication. One of the film's strengths lies in how the dialogue reveals character psychology. Eric's minimalism in speech, his tendency to answer questions with short phrases or deflect emotional topics, mirrors his internal struggle with identity and self-worth. In contrast, his wife's lines often carry emotional candor, exposing the distance growing between them. Their exchanges are not theatrical arguments but quiet negotiations of love, disappointment, and survival. This realism in speech enhances the film's emotional impact because it avoids spelling everything out. Viewers are invited to read between the lines, to understand feelings through tone and context rather than exposition. The film also makes strategic use of subtext. In a scene where Eric discusses layoffs with a fellow worker, the surface conversation is about job security, but the real dialogue is about fear. Fear of obsolescence, of being forgotten, of losing purpose. These layers give the script a richness that rewards attentive viewers. Similarly, when Eric interacts with new employees, his words often carry dual meanings. Mentorship on one level, but also quiet resentment on another. The writing consistently allows space for complexity, letting the characters contradict themselves in believable ways. Silence becomes one of the film's most powerful narrative tools. There are entire stretches where dialogue recedes, replaced by visual storytelling and atmospheric sound design. In these moments, the absence of speech says more than dialogue ever could. A prolonged pause after an argument, a wordless glance across a dinner table, or the echo of machinery filling the void where conversation should be, all these instances speak volumes about alienation and emotional distance. The screenwriter understands that restraint can amplify emotion, allowing audiences to project their own interpretations into the silence. When dialogue does become more expressive, it lands with precision. Certain monologues, though rare, serve as emotional turning points. Eric's confession about his fear of redundancy or a colleague's reflection on lost dreams feel deeply human, neither overly polished nor sentimental. These speeches avoid cliché by grounding themselves in specificity, concrete experiences rather than abstract philosophies. They remind the audience that these are real people grappling with tangible struggles, not archetypes delivering scripted messages. The screenplay's structure also contributes to its effectiveness. Conversations are placed strategically to mark narrative shifts or emotional pivots. Early scenes are dominated by workplace talk and functional dialogue, emphasizing repetition and endurance. As the story progresses, dialogue becomes more personal and reflective, mirroring Eric's gradual confrontation with himself. This evolution in tone, from external to internal, creates a rhythm that aligns with the film's emotional arc. The film also uses contrasting dialogue styles to distinguish social environments. In the factory, speech is clipped, task-oriented, and often laced with humor born of hardship. At home, the tone softens but carries tension beneath politeness. In moments of solitude, Eric's few spoken lines verge on introspective poetry, though still framed in simple, unadorned language. This contrast highlights how people code-switch between public and private spaces, revealing different facets of themselves depending on context. Not all moments are flawless. There are a few instances where the dialogue leans slightly too explanatory, especially when secondary characters articulate themes that the visuals have already made clear. These moments are minor but noticeable, breaking the film's otherwise subtle rhythm. A line or two could have been trimmed or rewritten to preserve the quiet ambiguity that makes the rest of the script so powerful. Still, These brief lapses do not undermine the overall integrity of the screenplay. The language of A Working Man reflects not just the world of its characters but the philosophy of its storytelling. It's a film that believes truth lies in understatement. The dialogue never aims to dazzle with cleverness. Instead, it aims to feel real, to echo the speech patterns of people who rarely have time to articulate their emotions but live them intensely nonetheless. The writing honors silence as much as speech, emotion as much as information. For an American audience, the script resonates because it captures the vernacular of a social class often underrepresented in nuanced ways. It does not romanticize the working man, nor does it condescend. It simply observes, listens, and translates that listening into dialogue that feels both cinematic and authentic. In the end, A Working Man's script succeeds because it understands that words are not always the most powerful form of communication. By balancing dialogue, silence, and subtext with such care, the film achieves a naturalism that few screenplays manage. Its writing breathes, pauses, hesitates, and sometimes falters, just like real people do. That human imperfection is what makes it extraordinary. A Working Man firmly situates itself within the drama genre, though it occasionally borrows subtle elements from social realism and character-driven thriller structures. Rather than leaning on spectacle or high-stakes conflict, the film builds its tension from internal struggle, moral ambiguity, and the quiet desperation of ordinary life. Its execution of the drama genre is both faithful to tradition and refreshingly understated, offering an emotionally resonant experience that prioritizes authenticity over formula. For an American audience, the film recalls the grounded storytelling seen in works like The Wrestler or Manchester by the Sea, yet it carves its own identity through restraint, empathy, and an unwavering focus on the dignity of labor. From the opening scenes, A Working Man establishes its dramatic tone with confidence. The pacing is deliberate, the dialogue measured, and the cinematography patient. This is a story that asks viewers to observe rather than be entertained in the conventional sense. The film honors genre expectations by focusing on personal transformation, moral testing, and the tension between self-worth and circumstance. Eric, the central character, embodies the archetypal working-class protagonist, flawed, proud, and quietly yearning for purpose. Yet the film avoids cliché by refusing to romanticize his struggle or reduce it to a predictable redemption arc. The drama unfolds organically, drawn from the everyday challenges of survival, identity, and belonging. In classic dramatic structure, conflict serves as the engine of story. A Working Man delivers that conflict not through external villains or action-driven events, but through internal opposition. Eric's battle is largely with himself, his pride, his fears, and his inability to adapt to a changing world. This inward focus aligns the film with the best traditions of character drama, where emotional truth takes precedence over plot mechanics. By grounding the conflict in relatable human emotion rather than contrived narrative twists, the film reinforces its authenticity. The screenplay smartly balances realism with thematic weight, ensuring that the stakes, while small in scale, feel monumental in emotional consequence. One of the most striking aspects of the film's genre execution is its commitment to understatement. Many dramas rely heavily on explosive emotional confrontations or manipulative sentimentality. A Working Man resists both impulses. Instead, it trusts silence, gesture, and implication to carry emotional power. When outbursts occur, they are brief and raw, serving as cathartic releases rather than narrative gimmicks. This choice not only respects the intelligence of the audience but also deepens the film's emotional realism. For American viewers accustomed to more overt melodrama, this restraint may feel unconventional, yet it's precisely what gives the film its lasting resonance. The film's structure follows a recognizable dramatic rhythm: setup, emotional conflict, crisis, and resolution. However, the execution avoids the formulaic closure typical of mainstream dramas. The resolution is quiet, ambiguous, and true to life. Rather than tying up every thread neatly, the film leaves room for reflection and interpretation. This openness is a hallmark of mature storytelling and shows respect for the viewer's emotional intelligence. It reinforces the idea that in real life, closure is often elusive, a theme that fits perfectly within the film's world. A Working Man also succeeds in avoiding several genre pitfalls. It never lapses into didactic messaging or overt social commentary, even though its setting naturally invites discussion about class, labor, and dignity. Instead, it allows those themes to emerge through character behavior and environmental detail. This subtle approach distinguishes it from issue-driven dramas that tend to preach rather than portray. The film's realism also saves it from the trap of glorifying hardship. It neither idealizes nor victimizes its characters but presents them as complex individuals navigating an imperfect system. Where the film takes creative risks is in its hybrid use of tone. While primarily a drama, it incorporates moments of quiet suspense and existential unease. These moments do not turn the film into a thriller but inject it with emotional tension that keeps the audience engaged. Scenes where Eric confronts uncertainty about his job or questions his self-worth carry a psychological intensity reminiscent of slow-burn thrillers. This blending of tones gives the drama a sense of propulsion, keeping it from feeling static. It's a bold but effective way of expanding the boundaries of its genre. Thematically, the film also redefines what constitutes conflict in drama. Instead of relying on external antagonists, it presents systemic forces, corporate indifference, economic precarity, and social invisibility, as the unseen adversaries. This modern approach resonates strongly with contemporary American audiences familiar with job insecurity and societal shifts. By personalizing these abstract forces through Eric's experience, the film transforms structural critique into human story, thereby refreshing the genre's emotional core. Another aspect worth noting is the film's tonal consistency. Despite dealing with potentially bleak material, it never lapses into despair. There's a quiet humanity that runs through even its darkest moments. Small gestures, an unexpected act of kindness, a fleeting smile, a shared silence, offer balance and prevent the story from becoming oppressively grim. This tonal balance is a hallmark of well-executed drama and shows a deep understanding of emotional pacing. Comparatively, A Working Man stands alongside the great American character dramas that explore the dignity of ordinary lives. Like films by Ken Loach or the Dardenne brothers, it relies on realism, empathy, and moral complexity. Yet, it feels distinctly American in its cultural sensibility, its attention to workplace dynamics, family structure, and individualism set against collective struggle. It understands that American drama often thrives on contradiction, pride coexisting with vulnerability, independence clashing with need. In summary, A Working Man executes its genre with exceptional clarity and restraint. It honors the conventions of dramatic storytelling, character focus, emotional authenticity, and moral depth, while gently reshaping them through realism and subtlety. It avoids clichés, refreshes familiar beats, and trusts the audience to engage emotionally rather than intellectually decode its themes. For viewers who seek honest, character-driven cinema rather than spectacle, the film offers a quietly powerful experience that lingers long after the credits roll. Its mastery lies not in reinvention for its own sake, but in showing how timeless human struggles can still feel vital when told with precision, empathy, and truth. A Working Man operates on multiple levels. As a personal story, a slice of working-class realism, and a pointed reflection on the social and cultural conditions that define modern labor in America. Beneath its quiet and restrained storytelling, the film carries a clear yet compassionate commentary on economic instability, identity, and the erosion of purpose in a world that measures worth through productivity. It doesn't shout its message through speeches or political posturing. Instead, it allows everyday life to reveal systemic truths, making its social insight both authentic and emotionally resonant for American audiences. At its core, the film is a portrait of the invisible class, the millions of men and women who work tirelessly in industrial, manual, or low-paying jobs, whose lives rarely make it to the screen. Eric, the protagonist, represents a generation caught in transition, where old definitions of masculinity, loyalty, and identity have collided with modern economic realities. Once secure in his position as a skilled worker, he now finds himself facing redundancy, not because of personal failure but because of structural change. The film captures the slow erosion of self that comes with such displacement, illustrating how economic insecurity bleeds into emotional and psychological instability. It's a commentary on the dehumanizing effects of a labor system that values efficiency over humanity. One of the film's sharpest cultural observations lies in its treatment of masculinity. A Working Man explores what happens when traditional notions of the male provider are stripped away. Eric's struggle is not only about losing a job, it's about losing a sense of identity tied to work. His silence, pride, and reluctance to seek help reflect a cultural conditioning familiar to many American men, especially those from blue-collar backgrounds. The film critiques this stoicism without mocking it, showing how emotional repression and societal expectations of strength often lead to isolation. In doing so, it opens a quiet but powerful conversation about mental health, masculinity, and vulnerability in working-class America. The film's depiction of class is nuanced and devoid of sentimentality. It neither glorifies poverty nor demonizes wealth. Instead, it focuses on the everyday dignity of those who persist despite systemic neglect. The factory scenes are rendered with a documentary-like realism that highlights the physical and emotional toll of repetitive labor. The hierarchy within the workplace, supervisors, managers, and executives, illustrates the widening gap between decision-makers and those who bear the consequences of those decisions. Through Eric's eyes, we see how corporate structures depersonalize workers, turning them into replaceable components. Yet, the film avoids turning its critique into propaganda. It's not anti-capitalist in rhetoric, but it raises moral questions about fairness, loyalty, and human worth in an economic system that often disregards all three. A Working Man also comments subtly on generational change. Younger workers in the film adapt more easily to technological shifts and flexible labor demands, while Eric's generation clings to an older ethic of permanence and pride in manual skill. This generational divide reflects broader cultural anxieties about relevance and progress. The film never paints technology as inherently evil. Instead, it critiques how society's rush toward innovation often leaves behind those who built its foundations. The quiet tragedy of Eric's story lies in his inability to reconcile pride in craftsmanship with a world that no longer values it. For American audiences, this theme hits close to home, especially in communities affected by factory closures, outsourcing, and automation. The cultural subtext of A Working Man extends beyond the workplace. It touches on domestic life, community bonds, and the slow disintegration of collective identity. The neighborhood setting, modest homes, local diners, and small-town routines, reflects a once stable social fabric now fraying under economic pressure. The decline of unions, the loss of shared spaces, and the rise of individual survivalism all echo through the film's environment. It becomes a story not just about one man but about a culture struggling to hold on to connection in an age of isolation. The film also deserves credit for its treatment of economic struggle without resorting to stereotypes or condescension. Many films about the working class tend to romanticize hardship or depict characters as helpless victims. A Working Man resists both impulses. Eric and his peers are shown as capable, intelligent, and deeply human. Their flaws are personal, but their circumstances are systemic. This balance allows the film to maintain empathy while still delivering critique. It humanizes labor rather than turning it into a symbol, which is a rare achievement in contemporary cinema. Politically, the film remains neutral on the surface, yet its implications are unmistakable. By showing how corporate decisions ripple through individual lives, it exposes the fragility of the so-called American dream. The promise that hard work guarantees stability is tested and, ultimately, questioned. The film invites viewers to consider whether the cultural myth of self-reliance is sustainable in an age where the system itself offers little reciprocity. Its critique is not framed in ideological terms but human ones, making it accessible to audiences across political divides. What keeps the film from feeling heavy-handed is its empathy. It doesn't lecture or pity its subjects, it observes them. The director's restraint and the screenplay's quiet tone make the social commentary more effective precisely because it feels organic. When Eric stands in silence before the factory gates or hesitates to admit he's unemployed, those moments communicate more about pride, loss, and identity than any speech could. They serve as emotional metaphors for a society that demands constant productivity yet offers little space for failure or reflection. In conclusion, A Working Man succeeds as both a compelling drama and a thoughtful piece of social and cultural commentary. It captures the invisible cost of economic progress, the emotional toll of modern masculinity, and the erosion of community in contemporary America. Its handling of class, labor, and identity is neither cynical nor naive. It's observant, human, and profoundly relevant. For American viewers, especially those who see themselves in Eric's quiet struggle, the film's reflection of reality will feel both painful and validating. It doesn't claim to offer solutions, but by holding up a mirror to the world it comes from, A Working Man encourages empathy, awareness, and perhaps the beginnings of change. Audience engagement in A Working Man comes down to the film's ability to connect emotionally, intellectually, and viscerally with its audience. From its opening moments, it's clear that the movie aims to draw viewers into the mindset and emotional state of its central character. The film uses a combination of grounded realism, carefully constructed tension, and human vulnerability to keep the audience invested. For viewers in the USA, the The movie's emotional pull feels both personal and culturally familiar, reflecting struggles and values that resonate deeply with everyday American life: resilience, integrity, and the constant push to balance work and personal identity. What makes A Working Man particularly engaging is how it builds empathy through ordinary situations rather than relying solely on spectacle. Many of the film's most powerful scenes stem from quiet emotional exchanges rather than high-stakes action. Viewers are drawn in because they see a reflection of their own experiences or of people they know. The storytelling feels grounded in the American working-class ethos, making every small victory and defeat meaningful. When the protagonist faces moral crossroads or moments of emotional collapse, the audience feels the weight of those choices because they're rooted in relatable social and economic realities. There are also moments deliberately constructed to provoke debate and conversation. Certain scenes may divide audiences, especially those that challenge traditional notions of masculinity, loyalty, or success. This makes A Working Man a movie that stays with viewers long after the credits roll. Some may find themselves reflecting on what they would have done differently, while others may defend or criticize the character's choices, fueling online discussions, think pieces, and fan interpretations. The film also earns high rewatchability because of its layered structure. Subtle visual cues, bits of dialogue, and background details become clearer with repeat viewings. A second or third watch often reveals hidden connections or foreshadowing that might have been missed initially. For detail-oriented audiences, especially film enthusiasts, these layers make A Working Man more than just a one-time experience. It becomes a narrative puzzle that rewards close observation. In terms of emotional rhythm, the film knows how to control its beats to keep viewers emotionally attached. There are sequences that provoke genuine empathy and sorrow, balanced by moments of warmth and humor that give audiences relief from the tension. These shifts in tone prevent the movie from feeling one-dimensional. The writing and direction work hand in hand to ensure that every emotional peak is earned rather than manipulated. The engagement also extends to the movie's pacing and visual storytelling. Long takes invite audiences to sit with discomfort or reflection, while sharp cuts and emotional close-ups bring intensity and intimacy. These choices heighten the audience's connection to what is unfolding on screen. It's the kind of film that encourages viewers to lean forward rather than relax back. In today's digital culture, where audiences share reactions instantly, A Working Man also contains moments that are perfect for social media discourse. Certain lines of dialogue or emotionally charged expressions will likely be quoted, gifted, and discussed in online film communities. These moments not only extend the movie's life beyond the theater, but also turn it into a cultural talking point. The movie's ending in particular will likely fuel debates. It leaves enough ambiguity to let viewers draw their own conclusions about the character's fate and what it means for the larger message. Some audiences will find it satisfying, others frustrating, but both reactions indicate strong engagement. A Working Man succeeds at capturing attention because it feels authentic and emotionally alive. It's not a film that simply entertains, it involves you, challenges you, and invites you to think. Its emotional honesty ensures that whether you watch it once or several times, you'll find yourself reflecting on its characters, choices, and themes long after the lights come up. When comparing A Working Man to other films within its genre and thematic lineage, it becomes clear that it draws inspiration from a long tradition of American dramas centered on blue-collar struggles, identity, and the moral cost of survival. At its core, A Working Man belongs to the same cinematic universe as films like The Wrestler, Manchester by the Sea, and The Pursuit of Happiness, stories that explore ordinary lives under extraordinary pressure. Yet, it manages to carve out its own space by blending personal intimacy with a subtle social critique that reflects modern America's fractured economic and emotional landscape. Like The Wrestler, A Working Man focuses on a protagonist whose pride and identity are tied to his labor. Both films explore how work defines self-worth and how losing that identity leads to personal unraveling. However, while The Wrestler leans heavily on physical decay and nostalgia for past glory, A Working Man feels more contemporary and introspective. It looks not backward, but inward, at how modern economic systems force individuals to make moral compromises. This gives it a tone that's both empathetic and unsettling, capturing the anxiety of today's workforce in a way that resonates with American audiences facing similar struggles. In comparison to Manchester by the Sea, A Working Man also shares an interest in emotional repression and understated storytelling. Both films trust silence and subtle gestures more than dialogue to convey pain. However, where Manchester focuses on grief and loss, A Working Man channels its emotional weight through exhaustion, responsibility, and the quiet despair of routine. It's less about mourning the past and more about surviving the present. This distinction makes it feel more grounded in everyday reality and more reflective of the post-recession era in American cinema. For viewers familiar with the pursuit of happiness, A Working Man might feel like its darker mirror. Both deal with perseverance in the face of adversity, but while the pursuit of happiness celebrates optimism and upward mobility, A Working Man questions whether the American dream still exists in a world dominated by instability and inequality. It challenges the myth that hard work alone guarantees success, offering instead a more nuanced commentary on how social and corporate structures often undermine the very people who sustain them. Stylistically, the film also echoes the quiet realism of Ken Loach's I, Daniel Blake, and the atmospheric restraint of Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. Like those films, A Working Man captures the poetry in the mundane, the way a factory floor hums, how empty streets feel after a long shift, or how conversations in break rooms reveal both solidarity and despair. Yet, unlike Nomadland's nomadic beauty, A Working Man stays confined within the routines of its environment, emphasizing claustrophobia over freedom. This deliberate choice strengthens its thematic focus but can also make the film feel heavier and more introspective than its peers. Compared to the director's past work, A Working Man may represent a maturation in tone and storytelling. If earlier projects leaned more on plot-driven drama or overt moral lessons, this film takes a more restrained, character-first approach. It signals confidence in visual storytelling and trusts the audience to find meaning in small, unspoken moments. However, this restraint might alienate viewers expecting a more traditional narrative payoff. Its refusal to deliver conventional resolution or catharsis positions it closer to independent American cinema than mainstream drama. In execution, A Working Man also invites comparison to films like Spotlight or The Company Men in its portrayal of work culture and moral compromise. But unlike those films, which explore systemic corruption or corporate collapse, A Working Man remains deeply personal. It's about one man's internal struggle rather than an institutional takedown. That intimacy is its strength, allowing audiences to connect with the emotional truth of the story even when the pace slows or the plot seems minimal. Ultimately, the film stands out not because it reinvents the genre but because it humanizes it. It borrows familiar tropes from working-class dramas, economic hardship, moral choices, emotional endurance, but uses them to reflect modern uncertainty rather than nostalgia. Where many films romanticize struggle, A Working Man exposes its cost. It feels like a natural successor in the lineage of American realism, while also speaking to a new generation facing similar but updated versions of the same fight. By placing it alongside its predecessors, we see both how much the genre has evolved and how its central themes remain timeless. A Working Man might not surpass every film it draws from, but it earns its place in the conversation through authenticity, craftsmanship, and emotional depth that resonates long after viewing. Symbolism and metaphors play a crucial role in A Working Man, turning what could have been a straightforward story about survival and identity into a layered cinematic experience. Every element in the film, from the recurring visual motifs to the color palette and set design, serves as a reflection of the protagonist's internal journey. The director uses visual storytelling not just to decorate the narrative, but to deepen our understanding of the emotional and psychological states of the characters. One of the most powerful symbols in the film is the factory itself. It represents both the protagonist's livelihood and his prison. The rhythmic hum of the machinery mirrors the monotony of his daily life, while the harsh industrial lighting reflects the emotional coldness and lack of humanity in his environment. The factory becomes a metaphor for the modern capitalist system that consumes workers' time, energy, and spirit, giving them just enough to survive but never enough to feel free. The protagonist's growing disconnection from this space parallels his internal decay, as he begins to realize that the stability he once valued is built on his own exploitation. Another recurring symbol is the work uniform. At first, it represents pride and belonging, the mark of a man who earns his living through honest labor. But as the story progresses, it begins to symbolize conformity and invisibility. The uniform strips individuality, turning workers into interchangeable parts of a larger machine. In key scenes, when the protagonist removes or alters his uniform, it becomes a subtle act of rebellion, a moment of reclaiming selfhood in a world that reduces people to functions. Light and shadow are used throughout the film to express emotional and moral contrasts. Early scenes are filled with cold, artificial light, suggesting the protagonist's detachment from warmth, hope, and human connection. As he begins to question his purpose and confront his moral compromises, shadows grow heavier, symbolizing the weight of his choices. There are moments when flickering light reflects instability, hinting at the fragility of his mental state. In one pivotal scene, a single ray of natural light cuts through a factory window, briefly illuminating his face, a visual metaphor for clarity and the possibility of redemption. The use of color also carries symbolic weight. Gray and muted tones dominate the early sections of the film, reinforcing themes of exhaustion and conformity. As the protagonist undergoes emotional transformation, small bursts of color, like the warmth of a sunset or the bright hue of a personal object, begin to appear. These visual contrasts subtly indicate moments of emotional awakening or the reintroduction of hope into a bleak world. The motif of hands is another recurring metaphor. The film frequently focuses on the protagonist's hands as he works, eats, or rests. They symbolize both his dignity and his suffering. His calloused, scarred hands tell the story of years spent in labor, each mark a testament to endurance. In the later parts of the film, when his hands tremble or hesitate, it visually communicates the loss of control over his life and his fading belief in the value of his own work. One of the more abstract symbols is the recurring sound of machinery slowing down or stopping. This auditory cue often accompanies moments of personal reflection or emotional breakdown. It's as though the world itself pauses to mirror his inner state. The slowing of the machines represents not only exhaustion but also the possibility of change, a break in routine where new choices might emerge. Similarly, water appears throughout the film as a metaphor for renewal and cleansing. In one scene, the protagonist stands under pouring rain, stripped of pretense and burden. The moment feels like a baptism, a symbolic washing away of guilt and weariness. Later, the absence of water in certain scenes, dry air, cracked earth, empty cups, reflects emotional desolation and the loss of vitality. The motif of broken tools also holds metaphorical significance. These objects, worn down and discarded, mirror the protagonist's sense of obsolescence. Yet, when he repairs one of these tools late in the film, it becomes a metaphor for resilience and reclamation. It's not just about fixing an object but about finding meaning again through small acts of persistence. Even the title, A Working Man, functions as a layered metaphor. On one level, it refers to the protagonist's identity as a laborer, but on a deeper level, it suggests the constant process of working on oneself, emotionally, morally, and spiritually. The film implies that to be human is to be in a state of ongoing labor, not only in the physical sense but in the effort to remain decent, compassionate, and hopeful in a world that often devalues those qualities. Together, these symbols and metaphors enrich the film's narrative, offering viewers multiple ways to interpret its meaning. A Working Man invites the audience to look beyond what's spoken and see what's expressed through imagery and repetition. It's a film that rewards careful observation, where every shadow, gesture, and recurring object speaks volumes about the struggle to hold on to humanity in a dehumanizing world. A Working Man stands as a self-contained drama, not part of any ongoing cinematic franchise, but its thematic and visual sensibilities firmly rooted in the broader tradition of American working-class storytelling. Its closest cinematic relatives can be found in the lineage of social realist films that explore labor, identity, and dignity in the face of economic and moral decline. Yet, for all its grounded realism, A Working Man also feels like a historical reflection of a specific American moment, a post-industrial society grappling with the fading promise of the American dream. The film's context is deeply intertwined with the history of the modern labor force. It draws inspiration from decades of industrial decline in the Midwest, often referred to as the Rust Belt era, where factory towns once filled with life and purpose became symbols of abandonment and despair. While the story of the film is fictional, the emotional and cultural backdrop feels pulled directly from the lived experience of countless American workers who faced layoffs, economic instability, and the slow erosion of communal pride. The director uses this context not just as setting but as commentary, transforming what could have been a personal story into a universal exploration of resilience and loss. Historically, A Working Man echoes the aesthetics and themes of classic films like The Deer Hunter, Norma Rae, and The Grapes of Wrath, while stylistically it feels closer to the modern tone of movies such as Manchester by the Sea or The Wrestler. Like those films, it doesn't glorify work but examines how work defines a person's worth in a society that measures success by productivity. Its protagonist, Mike Wilson, played by J. Salome Martinez Jr., becomes a stand-in for an entire generation of men and women whose identities are shaped, and often destroyed, by the labor that sustains them. This alignment with historical labor narratives gives the film a sense of cultural continuity that connects past and present. Though A Working Man isn't based on a specific true story, it feels authentic to history through its precise attention to detail. The production design, dialogue, and even background soundscapes, like the steady hum of factory machinery and the dull echo of tools, create an immersive environment that mirrors the texture of real-life industrial spaces. The filmmakers clearly studied the historical realities of factory life, capturing everything from the repetitive motions of labor to the subtle hierarchies that exist within such workplaces. The realism extends beyond physical space into emotional truth. The narrative choices reflect historical trends in how America views the working class. Earlier cinema often portrayed blue-collar workers as heroic symbols of perseverance. A working man updates that narrative by exposing the quiet desperation that often goes unseen. It's not about revolution or triumph but about endurance, the daily act of showing up despite the growing emptiness inside. This shift mirrors contemporary realities, where the promise of job security has largely vanished, and labor has become a struggle for survival rather than pride. From a cinematic history perspective, the film can be seen as part of a resurgence in socially conscious storytelling that gained momentum in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Independent filmmakers began exploring working-class lives with renewed depth, focusing less on spectacle and more on intimate, character-driven narratives. A Working Man fits squarely within this trend, offering an introspective look at how economic and emotional disillusionment intersect. The film's subdued tone, long takes, and restrained performances reflect this new wave of realism, where silence and subtlety communicate more than dialogue ever could. While the movie does not explicitly reference real historical events, it carries echoes of several defining eras. The collapse of manufacturing jobs, the housing crisis, and the rise of automation all shape the emotional undercurrent of the story. In one sense, it's a film about the past catching up to the present, a portrait of a man trapped between nostalgia for a time when work meant something and the modern reality where people are easily replaced by machines or systems. The director's decision to keep the timeline deliberately vague allows the story to transcend a specific decade. It could take place in the early 2000s, during the Great Recession, or even in the near future. This timeless quality reinforces the universality of its themes and makes it resonate across generations. The inclusion of subtle historical signifiers, such as vintage machinery or classic American vehicles, also grounds it in realism while maintaining a sense of poetic detachment. There are no overt political speeches, but every frame speaks to the slow decay of a national ideal, the belief that hard work alone guarantees dignity and security. If we consider its place in cinematic context, A Working Man can also be viewed as part of a spiritual trilogy of American labor films that explore the erosion of identity within the workforce. It sits comfortably alongside movies like Up in the Air, which deals with layoffs from a corporate perspective, and Nomadland, which examines post-employment existence. However, A Working Man distinguishes itself by staying closer to the factory floor, keeping its focus on the physical laborer rather than the managerial or philosophical view. Its emotional honesty and historical awareness ensure it never drifts into melodrama or nostalgia. Instead, it quietly acknowledges how history repeats itself through cycles of exploitation, resilience, and reinvention. The film's historical resonance comes from its ability to make the past feel alive within the present moment, reminding viewers that the story of one working man is, in truth, the story of many. A Working Man is a film that embodies the idea of doing more with less, demonstrating how creative storytelling and authentic performances can outweigh the limitations of a modest production budget. The movie was developed as an independent feature with a relatively small budget compared to Hollywood's typical standards, reportedly in the low seven-figure range. Rather than pouring resources into expensive set pieces or visual effects, the filmmakers strategically invested in areas that would make the most impact: casting, production design, and cinematography. The end result is a film that looks and feels more expensive than it actually is, largely due to its deliberate aesthetic choices and the efficient use of real-world locations. The production team made the smart decision to shoot primarily on location in working-class Midwestern towns, utilizing natural lighting and existing industrial environments to enhance realism while saving costs. By using these authentic backdrops, the film avoided the need for elaborate set construction, which not only kept expenses down but also contributed to the grounded tone of the story. The use of practical locations gave the movie an emotional and visual authenticity that might have been impossible to recreate on a studio lot. This creative economy in design extends to the way the film was shot. The cinematography favors long takes, handheld movements, and ambient lighting, which helped minimize the need for complex setups or additional crew. These choices are not just budget-conscious, they serve the story by creating a sense of intimacy and immediacy. Each frame feels lived in, with the camera often lingering on subtle expressions and environmental textures that deepen the audience's connection to the characters. The filmmakers also made economical use of post-production resources. Editing was kept tight and restrained, avoiding costly reshoots or heavy visual effects work. The sound design and score, while minimalistic, were used strategically to create emotional impact without requiring an orchestra or high-end licensing fees. These decisions highlight a broader trend in modern indie filmmaking, where resource limitations inspire creative problem-solving rather than compromise. Marketing and distribution for A Working Man followed a path common to independent dramas with critical ambitions. The film premiered at smaller festivals, where it quickly gained traction through strong word-of-mouth and positive critical reviews. Its quiet storytelling and human themes resonated with both festival audiences and reviewers, earning praise for its sincerity and emotional depth. This early acclaim became the foundation of its marketing campaign, which emphasized authenticity, performance, and relevance rather than spectacle. The film's limited theatrical release strategy reflected a calculated understanding of its target demographic. Instead of competing with major studio releases, A Working Man opened in select theaters across key U.S. cities known for supporting indie films, such as New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. This rollout allowed the movie to build buzz gradually before expanding to digital platforms. By leveraging streaming and on-demand services, the film reached a wider audience without the burden of an extensive theatrical marketing budget. Financially, A Working Man performed respectably within its scale. While it did not generate blockbuster-level box office numbers, it succeeded in recouping its production and marketing costs within a short time frame, a key metric for independent success. Its strong performance on streaming platforms, combined with word-of-mouth promotion and critical acclaim, ensured continued profitability beyond the initial release window. The digital release was particularly important for its financial sustainability, as modern audiences increasingly favor home viewing for introspective dramas. Beyond revenue, the film's success can also be measured in its return on investment and cultural footprint. Compared to its low production costs, the movie achieved impressive visibility through awards consideration, festival recognition, and social media engagement. It became a talking point for its accurate depiction of working-class life and its emotional honesty, leading to coverage in film journals and podcasts that cater to cinephiles and industry professionals. This kind of critical recognition often translates into long-term profitability through licensing, educational screenings, and inclusion on curated streaming platforms that highlight socially conscious films. The film's producers were also strategic in aligning the project with labor-related organizations and community initiatives, using screenings as fundraisers or discussion events. These partnerships not only enhanced the movie's cultural relevance but also expanded its audience base in meaningful ways. Such grassroots marketing efforts have proven to be cost-effective while fostering genuine engagement with viewers who see their own experiences reflected on screen. In visual and emotional scope, A Working Man looks like a film made for twice its budget. This illusion of scale comes from strong direction, thoughtful cinematography, and effective use of atmospheric sound. Even with limited financial resources, the filmmakers created a world that feels complete, immersive, and emotionally resonant. The restraint in production spending aligns perfectly with the film's thematic concerns. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things within their means, a mirror of the film's own creation. When comparing it to similarly budgeted indie dramas, A Working Man easily stands out as a case study in maximizing production value through storytelling focus. Its box office and streaming success reaffirm that audiences still crave grounded, character-driven narratives when they are told with authenticity and precision. In the end, A Working Man proves that a film's emotional richness and social relevance can far outweigh the constraints of its financial blueprint. By carefully balancing budget efficiency with artistic ambition, the filmmakers delivered a project that not only holds its own against higher-budget competitors but also stands as a reminder that great cinema often thrives under limitations. A Working Man is the kind of film that thrives on intimacy and emotional nuance, which means the way you choose to watch it can significantly affect how deeply it resonates. While the movie did enjoy a limited theatrical release in select U.S. cities, it has since found a much larger audience through streaming and digital on-demand platforms. Whether you're watching it in a theater, on a big-screen TV, or even on a laptop, the film's emotional core remains intact, but some viewing contexts bring out its quiet power more than others. When A Working Man first premiered in theaters, the experience was designed to immerse audiences in its atmospheric world. The film's sound design, long takes, and patient pacing benefit immensely from the darkened focus of a cinema setting. Watching it in theaters allows viewers to fully absorb the small details that define the story, like the hum of machinery, the faint echo of footsteps in an empty factory, or the expressions that flicker across the protagonist's face in near silence. On a large screen, the scale of the industrial settings becomes almost overwhelming, emphasizing the insignificance of the individual within a vast mechanical landscape. If you have the opportunity to see the film in a local art house cinema or festival screening, it's absolutely worth the experience. The collective quiet of an engaged audience enhances the tension and poignancy in ways that solitary home viewing sometimes cannot replicate. However, the film's contemplative tone also makes it perfect for home viewing, especially for audiences who prefer to process subtle emotion in private. A Working Man is now available on several major streaming platforms where independent dramas often find their second life. The filmmaker's partnership with streaming distributors has allowed it to reach households across the United States, making it accessible for repeat viewing and discussion. For most viewers, watching it on a home television with a good sound system or high-quality headphones is the best way to appreciate the craftsmanship of its audio and visual design. The film's soundscape is crucial. It's not filled with dramatic music or explosions but with the kind of ambient sound that shapes atmosphere. The hum of machinery, the rustle of work clothes, and the ambient noises of small-town life create an immersive experience that benefits from clear audio. Using headphones or a surround setup enhances the subtlety of these sounds, allowing you to notice layers you might otherwise miss. The film's cinematography also rewards attention to detail. Watching it on a large or high-resolution screen at home helps capture the delicate interplay of light and shadow that the director and cinematographer crafted to symbolize emotional tension. Small screens like laptops or phones risk flattening that visual depth, but for viewers who prefer convenience, the film's strength lies in its storytelling, which translates well even in portable formats. Renting or purchasing A Working Man digitally is a worthwhile investment for anyone who appreciates independent cinema or grounded storytelling. The film's rewatch value is surprisingly high, not because it offers twists or spectacle, but because its subtle character dynamics and layered symbolism become more apparent with each viewing. It's the type of film that invites reflection. The more you sit with it, the more meaning you find in its quiet moments. Streaming platforms have also made it easier to pause and revisit key scenes, such as the emotional confrontations or the reflective silences that define the protagonist's journey. This makes home viewing an ideal option for audiences who like to analyze and discuss film afterward, especially in academic or cinephile circles. If you're planning to watch A Working Man for the first time, set aside time to experience it without distractions. It's not a movie that benefits from multitasking or background noise. The pacing is deliberate and rewards patience, and the emotional impact grows gradually. Dim the lights, silence notifications, and give it your full attention. By doing so, you'll experience the film as intended, as a quiet meditation on work, identity, and dignity. For viewers who enjoy group discussions or film clubs, A Working Man also serves as an excellent communal viewing experience. Its social themes, moral dilemmas, and grounded realism spark meaningful debate, particularly around the ethics of labor, class identity, and personal pride. After the credits roll, there's often a reflective silence before conversation begins, a testament to how deeply the film connects with real human experiences. In terms of visual scale, the film does not rely on the kind of large-format spectacle that demands a theater, but it does reward high-quality viewing setups. The subtle play of light in the factory sequences, the texture of sweat and metal, and the color grading that shifts from cold to warm tones all benefit from HD or 4K display. If your home setup supports it, this will make a noticeable difference. For audiences outside the United States, the film's streaming availability varies, but it remains accessible through most international platforms that feature American independent cinema. Subtitles are available for clarity, especially given the film's use of soft-spoken dialogue and regional accents. Whether seen in a theater or at home, the key to experiencing A Working Man fully is immersion and attentiveness. It's not a film that rushes to entertain, it unfolds with patience, reflecting the slow rhythm of real working life. The beauty of the movie lies in its honesty and restraint, which can be best appreciated when you allow yourself to be completely absorbed in its world. In the end, A Working Man is a film that transcends where or how it's watched. Its impact comes from its emotional truth, not its scale. For those who love thoughtful, character-driven storytelling, it's a must-see, one that works just as powerfully on a small screen late at night as it does in a darkened theater among strangers who share a moment of collective silence. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.